In 2010, the fate of the 21 original BFDI contestants was in the hands of as few as 7 people voting for who they want eliminated, and it led to this elimination order. But what if BFDI was vote to save? And what if it was as popular then as it is now? How would the elimination order have changed? And how would this have changed the entire season? Let's figure it out. In episode 1, the Squashy Grapes lose the challenge, so in episode 2, they're up for elimination. Originally, Flower was eliminated with 4 votes. You might be thinking, Flower has such a huge role in this 2-parter and we love meanies. She'd stay over some boring character like Rocky or Teardrop. But that's not true. If you check BFB 28, Leafy goes from the most liked character to the least liked because of her murder spree in episode 27. And even that's more justified than Flower's actions. So it's clear to me, even with vote to save, Flower still gets the boot. Come episode 3's elimination, there's one thing we know for certain. Spongy can't win vote to eliminate or vote to save. He's out for sure. Not super different so far. Although Blocky did cheat in episode 3's challenge and he did kill Ice Cube like a billion times, he's still more relevant and funny than Woody, who had been getting similar vote counts and did nothing the entirety of the last challenge. Therefore, come episode 4, I think it'd be Woody's time to go. Blocky wouldn't be able to escape elimination long though. I think had he been present in the cake challenge, he'd have found a way to bake Ice Cube into a cake and therefore would have gotten himself the boot just by being less likable and more cruel than the other teammates. Episode 6 is where the true divergence begins. Pin is essentially the main character in season 1, and she's not overtly cruel like Blocky or Flower. She definitely wouldn't have gotten out. It would have been Eraser. He had Match with a weak links on the team, but I believe Eraser would have gotten fewer votes. Match was a part of the Alliance, which I think gave her more memorability that Eraser couldn't beat. In episode 7, we're back to the original elimination order because Needle would have gotten out regardless. Her slapping joke is repetitive, everyone loves Coiny, and Ice Cube is far too sympathetic in season 1 to be eliminated so early. Needle's dislikes would have translated to a lack of likes, and she would have gotten out. There was no elimination in episode 8, but the rejoin in episode 9 still would have brought Blocky back, even though it might have been close between him and Eraser. Snowball and Teardrop would have still been the bottom 2. However, because Eraser was eliminated, he wouldn't have been there to vote for Snowball. Pin would have been there, and Pin was far friendlier to Teardrop, especially because Teardrop would have never argued with Pin over leadership. Snowball would have gotten out, and Teardrop would have stayed with a 3-2 vote. In episode 11, it's a toss-up between the 5 players up for elimination. Tennis Ball isn't very relevant in early BFDI, but he's more likable than Coiny, who seems to just slap Fiery. Rocky messed up the tiebreaker and is pretty gross and useless, so the bottom 2 would have most likely been Coiny and Rocky. Coiny definitely would have stayed over Rocky, especially with Pin and Teardrop voting for a new team member over Snowball and Eraser. In episode 12, we would have seen Tennis Ball, Golf Ball, and Fiery up for elimination, and Tennis Ball and Golf Ball would have for sure been the bottom 2. And there is no way Golf Ball would have beaten out Tennis Ball, especially because in the original, Golf Ball can't even beat out Rocky. So she's eliminated. Come the end of episode 12, everyone is given points. Because the people left in the game are a little different, we're gonna have to calculate the points of each contestant to see who would have been up for elimination. Eraser had 2 win tokens, but he isn't in the game in this version of BFDI by the time he received either, so we need to give them to someone else. In episode 6, we're going to assume Pin is swapped with Eraser and therefore receives a win token along with Fiery and Pen. And in episode 10, Eraser received a win token for being the last standing on his team during the tiebreaker, but because both Eraser and Snowball are out at this time, we're just going to assume Pencil would have won this token as she's the last standing besides those 2. This would mean Pencil has 1 win token and Pin has 2, bringing them to 45 and 60 points respectively. Next, we need to calculate how many points each person would receive from their challenge performance. It's impossible to truly know how characters would have done in challenges they never appeared in, but in the ladder climbing challenge, we can assume Teardrop would have done well as she's usually good at physical challenges, Pin would have done fine but not great, and Coiny would have done pretty well. This would lead to the contestants receiving these points for the challenge. Because in this version of BFDI, the show is far more popular and also vote to save, it would be impossible to include vote totals. So instead, we're going to take a point off for every time a character has been up for elimination. Therefore, this is the final point order. This leaves Leafy, Match, Bubble, and Tennis Ball in the danger zone. Between them, it would have been Tennis Ball's time to go. He was not well liked during the season of BFDI because he was a bit irrelevant, and the rest of the characters had a bigger spotlight. For the Finding the Ball challenge, we can assume the placement order would have been relatively similar, with the same events happening just to different people, such as Eraser's actions being swapped with Pin. So I believe the placements would have looked something like this. This means our bottom 4 are Leafy, Ice Cube, Bubble, and Match. In this scenario, I believe Match still leaves. The other characters are well liked, and Match is merely just Pencil's bestie. Because the rejoin wasn't determined by votes and Spongy was still eliminated second, I think it's clear he still would have rejoined and received 38 points for his 38 loaves. Tennis Ball would not have gotten the bonus points since he's eliminated. Instead, someone else who had very low points would have been written to receive them, and I think that person would have been Bubble, because it's funny to imagine how she'd say the word magnet. Additionally, the armless characters would still have received sympathy points, which at this point is only Ice Cube and Spongy. In the next challenge, Pin would have gotten out first, Pen and Fiery still would have fell next, Spongy and Leafy would fall, then Pencil, then Ice Cube, then Coiny, then Teardrop, and then Bubble and Blocky. That would bring the points to this. In this case, I think it would have been Ice Cube's time to go. She rarely spoke, she didn't do much, and she was in the alliance, but she wasn't a huge member. So I think there would have been a large group of Pin lovers waiting to save her from the TLC. People love Bubble, and people love Leafy. For the challenge, I believe everything would have gone similarly, except that I've switched Tennis Ball's placement with Teardrop, Ice Cube's with Pin, and Coiny's with Rocky to create these scores. So the final points would be this. At this point, we don't actually know what Pin and Coiny would have been doing during the last few episodes. Pin is a huge question mark. However, from what we've seen, Coiny's entire plot in season 1 is centered around Fiery and slapping him, while Pin most likely would have had some sort of interesting character interactions, especially while trying to lead her team. That's why I believe that Coiny would have gotten out here over Pin. The bowling challenge leaves a lot of points to be removed and played with, so this is going to be kind of interesting to decide. Let's say everyone bowls exactly how they did, except Teardrop bowls 8 pins, as she's usually very good at challenges, Pin bowls 1 since she's not super athletic, and Pen bowls 7 along with Blocky. Spongy is still disqualified. Leafy still takes 10 points from everybody, but because Ice Cube is out, only Bubble is safe from Pencil's 150 points, meaning she would subtract 21 points from everyone, but there would still be 3 points remaining, so I think she would just remove them from Spongy because, I don't know, he's stinky. Blocky has 210 points to distribute, so he would drain the rest of Bubble's 94 points, and then 58 from Pencil and Leafy for subtracting his score. Fiery, instead of subtracting from Ice Cube, would subtract 100 from Teardrop since she's his opposite, and then 100 off of Spongy for being in first. 40 points from Blocky for his move on Bubble, and 30 from Leafy and Pencil each. Teardrop, having 240 points to play with, would remove 150 from Fiery for revenge, and 90 from Blocky for his move on Bubble. Pen would have 210 points to play with, and he would remove 100 from Teardrop and Fiery respectively for their revenge on Blocky, and 5 from Pencil and Leafy each for taking his points. Finally, Pin would only have 30 points to play with, and would remove 30 from Spongy, simply just because he couldn't compete. This would leave the scores as follows. That means everyone would be up for elimination except Pen. Looking at the people left in and thinking about how vote to save works, I do not think Spongy would have stayed in over someone like Blocky. Blocky is far more likable, even though he's a bit cruel. And Spongy wasn't even able to compete last challenge. He's irrelevant. Then, instead of the prize of 125 points going to Ice Cube for receiving the least votes, in this version of BFDI, it would have gone to whoever received the most votes, which I believe would have been Fiery, since he was a fan favorite at the time and had the least amount of points. Bubble and Pencil still would have won and received 200 points, and Pen and Blocky would have teamed up and gotten 100 points each. I think Fiery and Pin would have teamed up and gotten 15 points each, and I think Leafy still would have lost, this time somehow killing Teardrop, and they would have received minus 1,000 points. This would result in these points, leaving Fiery, Teardrop, and Leafy up for elimination. In episode 18, Teardrop would have been eliminated. The contestants were voting, so I think they would have just said, Teardrop doesn't talk to us, so she's out. But would David have still debuted? Yes. I definitely think he still would have debuted over someone like Bommy. He's just very funny, it's a very silly character, and he's already been mentioned in the series and already gotten votes before. Once the 2-digit scoreboard comes into play, these are the points. We can assume Pencil still would have won, David would have come second, and then guess that Bubble and Leafy would have tied for 4th, and the others would have gotten 5 points each. This leaves our totals here. This might be the most controversial take in this video, but I think that Pencil stays. Pencil was unfairly put up for elimination, and if the show was massively popular and vote to save, I think there would have been a huge effort to save her. And because of that, I think it would have taken a lot of votes from Bubble, since her fans probably would be fans of Pencil too, and therefore, Bubble would have gotten out. The points are gone, we are free of them now, so it's on to the next contest. At this point, neither Blocky or Pen have been up for elimination in a grip, so I think that Fiery, Leafy, Pencil, and Pin would have been safe, while Blocky, Pen, and David would have been up for elimination. However, David is not surviving over Blocky or Pen. David couldn't even survive over Spongy in the original BFDI season, so David is out and we're left with our final 6. In this episode, because Bubble is no longer in, I believe Pin would have been the one to get into her spaceship and shoot Fiery, because that seems like a Pin thing to do. Additionally, she'd still give her immunity ticket to Leafy because they've been pals since the beginning. This leaves Pen, Blocky, Fiery, and Pencil up for elimination to be voted for by the eliminated contestants. And it's also time for the rejoin. First off, because the eliminated contestants vote, anyone could be eliminated for any reason. But if we look at the eliminated contestants, Pencil would have gotten a good chunk of votes from Bubble, Match, and Ice Cube. Fiery would get some votes because he's pretty likable, at least most of the 4. And Pen and Blocky would have split the votes between them. But I definitely think Pen would have gotten more votes since he's nicer. Blocky would be eliminated, and rejoining would still be Flower since she's been out of the game so long. The long jump competition happens, and Leafy still wins by a long shot, but we have to remember Leafy gives her immunity to Spongy for using him as fuel. However, because Spongy wasn't in the game during this scene, we have to assume someone else would have been used as fuel. And my guess is Fiery. So Leafy would have given her immunity to Fiery as an apology, and the rest would have been up for elimination. Pencil was pretty evil in this season and started killing people on purpose, so she's definitely out during this elimination because I don't think people would want to get Flower out so soon. We can assume the next challenge, Fiery and Flower still win because of their speaker boxes, so we'll put up Leafy, Pen, and Pin. At this point, we can assume that Pen is eliminated. He's not typically super relevant, even like nowadays, and it can take just one episode of everyone else being more important and funny to get someone out. I believe Pin would win this challenge the exact same way Bubble did, because Flower would still be doing the same things to Fiery and Leafy, and therefore Fiery, Leafy, and Flower would be up for elimination, and obviously I think that Flower would be eliminated. Even if she's more exciting to watch, people still do not like when characters murder others for fun. This leaves our final 3 to be Leafy, Pin, and Fiery, and I think it's pretty obvious that no matter what, Fiery still wins. At this point, we don't know if the Ferris wheel stuff still would have happened or if people would have the exact same feelings about Fiery, Leafy, and Pin, but I just think that he's an everyman, and I think he definitely has the win in the bag no matter what. So yeah, that's my theory of what would have happened if BFDI was vote to save, and I want to thank all of these people for helping me figure out the elimination order and just helping me write this video overall, and I hope you really liked it because it took a lot of time to make. So thank you so much, and subscribe.